I haven't really done any wholesaling. When I was doing flips, we would find an occasional flip we just didn't want to work on.
Yep.
And instead we would just turn it over and wholesale it.
Yep.
But I never actively did the wholesaling thing.
Got it. For me, it's just always been a risk situation, right? I know you're really big into mental health, and me too, because I've been on the other side of really hard mental health situations, right? I think I became a millionaire in my 20s, and immature, completely like broken mindset, broken life in every way, addiction, all the things, right? And when you are in that spot and you have all that money and you have all of your worth, all of your identity, everything that is you is attached to the accomplishments and the money and all the things. And when that leaves, you're in the worst hole ever. And so because of that, I've insulated myself. I've insulated myself to put myself in situations that are not going to put me back in a triggering spot or in a place. And so for me, where I differ from my bestie Pace, right? Who I know you know well, he loves leverage, right? And he sees leverage as an asset, and he's 100% right in how he rolls and what he's doing. And I wish I had his balls,
his risk tolerance.
His risk
right?
tolerance.
Yeah.
That's the right way to put it.
It's the first thing I sit down with every real estate client I work with. I want to find out what's your risk tolerance.
Right.
Because like you said, I'm kind of like you.
Yeah.
I went through the downturn in 07, 08.
Yeah.
Like, no thanks. I don't ever want to go back to that.
Right.
I'm set up enough now that I never have to work again. There's plenty of people making more money than me with nicer homes than me, but I am very safe and comfortable, but also aggressive.
Yes.
But I'm like, I have 30% paid off on every property I own,
right.
or more.
I have no
at least. Yeah, I have at least 30%. Now, some I have paid off because I just never want to get in a place where I have to go back to 08, 09, the way that felt.
Yeah.
Did you lose it all then?
I did. So in my rise, right, between 2002 to 2012, I made around $12 million wholesaling.
All wholesaling?
All wholesaling.
Dude, you wish you kept a few of those?
I wish I kept a few of those, yeah. Here's where it went wrong, right? So, I kept very little money because I was spending it all on toys. I had $1 million worth of cars, just stupidity, right? I did buy my mom a house on a lake. I did buy myself a beautiful home on a hill in Calgary, which is where I started my career. In real estate.
I love Calgary.
It's a great city.
I've been to Stampede and the whole
thing. Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Wow, what a gong show that is, right?
Oh, yeah. So fun.
But I looking back at that, right? When I was in that spot, I had zero discipline when it came to how to manage your finances, how to manage your life, how to manage your relationships.
Which, by the way, if you haven't gone through that, you don't really understand it, because it's not like it is now where there's so much information. It wasn't back then.
No.
And you just assume the money's always going to be there.
Right.
It was coming so easily, and you didn't know any different. I don't know if this is my experience. I'm sure it was the same for you. And so if you didn't actually experience that, you kind of hear us talking, you're like, you guys are idiots. But the truth is, it just felt like it was like this never-ending funnel of money that was never going to end.
It did. And then also, I didn't realize that the rules were set against me in a way. So here's the quick version. What I had done is I took a lot of the capital. I wasted a lot of it, but a good chunk of it, I put it towards purchasing these multifamily properties. And my sister and I were holding 4 large multifamily buildings. They were apartments at the time. We were converting them into condominiums. So we were going to strata title them. We were going to renovate them and then sell them off. I had leverage on all of them. And what ended up happening is the bank that gave us the initial purchase and construction loan, they gave us those loans, the construction loan specifically, based off of 50% pre-sales. So before we started anything, right after the acquisition, and sometimes before the acquisition, when we'd have a little bit of time to pre-sell, they would make us pre-sell 50% of the building. And once we pre-sold 50% of the building with $5,000 deposits, they would fund the construction. And so because we had all of these pre-sold and we had construction financing coming and we were moving along, what ended up happening is that bank called us and said, hey, our qualifications have all changed. You've seen the credit situation is radically changed in the market. because all of these aren't actual funded mortgages, and the deposits that you have are on pre-sales, we actually need to requalify everybody who has put a deposit down that gave you the qualified construction financing. But don't worry, everything will work out fine. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, what is happening right now? But I trusted that the bank wasn't trying to do anything, where they would ruin us, right? I was completely wrong. They requalified everybody, and like 5 out of the hundreds of pre-sales that we had actually requalified. And so they then called every one of the loans. They called all the construction loans. We couldn't even debt service any longer, and it just turned into a complete. We lost everything.
What year was this in?
This is 2007, 2008.
Yeah. So right when it's all falling apart.
Right when it was all falling apart.
Well, it's by the way, like the people that were doing exactly what you were, if you'd have done that a year and a half earlier, you'd have made so much money, because that was the number one way to make money back then.
Yes.
You find apartments, convert them to condos, sell them one at a time. Like that was the game that everyone wanted to be in.
Right.
I had a buddy whose dad, he was a builder, but the same thing. They took deposits for people, and once the bank like made him change it. And what he did, unfortunately, is he created straw buyers. So fake buyers. Yep. He actually ended up going to prison for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For mortgage fraud.
Yeah. Because they were, to keep the deal alive, they were trying to have these deposits, these, down payments and all these things. But when it got called, either you had the buyers or you didn't. And so in your case, so what happened? So did you end up losing all the money that you had put down? And
we lost all the money we had put down. And because we had already started construction on these projects, they were gutted. And now the buildings aren't worth nearly what they were worth when they were full. And so now there's a deficit in each of these buildings. And so they go to sell them all. Interestingly enough, as you can imagine, all of them were worth less than our acquisition because of the
market's falling, and you've stripped them.
And we've stripped the buildings. And so they took every one of those properties back. All of the down payments that we had in was gone. All of the cash that we had put in construction, gone. And now we're just kind of sitting there thinking, what's next? And very quickly, because the way that the banking system in Canada works versus the United States, it's completely different. In the United States, we have a lot of advocacy groups that actually, go out and help the consumer. They help people. And people were doing loan modifications, and the banks and the government.
The banks wanted to work with you.
Yeah, they wanted to work with us, right? The banks and the government aren't nearly as in bed as they are in Canada. In Canada, banking is almost government. They are so tied together. You don't know where one ends and where one begins. And so when they took the properties back, very quickly, and then they came after our assets. So they came and they took my mother's home. Because my parents actually co-signed the construction loans.
I was going to ask. So did you collateralize all that?
We did. We of course, personal guarantees, all the things, right? We thought everything was going to be fine. And so there they go. We lose my home, my parents' home, vehicles were getting repossessed. And it happened so quickly, Jimmy. Like I had whiplash at how fast the downturn affected us. And at that point, I kind of just gave up, right? We ducked our head in the sand. I didn't know that, if I should have advocated more, I should have gone to court, I should have fought, I should have explained, how does the bank give us the loan in the first place and then take the loan back? And isn't there something protecting us? At least let them renegotiate with us, give us a chance. But I was just so immature. I was so depressed that I literally just put my head in the sand and everything left.
Wow. I remember, during that time, it was so difficult because it became impossible to do anything. The banks wouldn't lend on it. I remember I was getting this dentist a house. It was just a rental property. It was like $250. It was probably worth $325. Was going to rent it with a $600 per month profit. And he had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, 800 something credit score. And we couldn't get him qualified at that time. It was it was nuts. They went from like the extreme of, I remember I sold a house to a kid in high school once. I don't even know how he got qualified. Never bothered. I didn't want to ask because I didn't want to be in trouble for it. And then from that to this, and it just, the pendulum swung so fast and it happened so quickly. So how old were you during that?
In my mid-late 20s, right? So
Crazy, right?
it was
Like
crazy.
you're going through this roller coaster
My
of
goodness.
emotion.
And to kind of frame it for you, right? So I grew up in a very working class, like lower middle class upbringing, right? My mom and dad both worked 10 to 12-hour days. My sister and I were latchkey kids, so she took care of me. My sister, she's a few years older than I. She raised me because my mom was working, my dad was working. We didn't see them. And I had, originally I was supposed to be a doctor, right? I'm Indian. So my parents were like, go be a doctor. That's the only way you're ever going to not be like us. You don't want to work the way we work. You don't want to live the way we live. You want to do better for you. We came to this country so you could do better. So go be a doctor and do better. I had a near 4.0 GPA. Dean's List in college. I took the entrance exam for medical school. I did fairly well on that. In fact, a doctor. I keep naming him, but I'm going to stop because I don't want to get him in trouble. A person who is a doctor right now, cheated off me on the medical school entrance exam, and he got into medical school and I didn't.
Wow.
And so I think that's fate. In reality, when I look back at it now, I think that was the hand of God saying, "Hey, Jamil, you're not meant to be a doctor. There's something better for you around the corner." But it was a pivotal point for me because that's when I realized, hey, I got to take my own destiny in my own hands. And so I grow up poor. I'm in this situation now where I do my first wholesale deal. I make near $50,000. I think I invented wholesaling at the time because there was no Cody Sperber, there was no Ron LeGrand. I'm in Canada. Internet doesn't really exist at this time. It's early 2000s, right? It's like,
how did you know to do it? Like, we just hustling and came up with the idea?
No, kind of. So what ends up happening is I'm in this media company. The business was selling websites early 2000, and my business partner at the time, him and his father are real estate developers as well, and they are building luxury duplexes on infill lots. So they bulldoze these old bungalows. They build these luxury duplexes in the inner city parts of the town. And I overhear them say they're going to make $160,000 on this project. And I'm like dead in my tracks. What did you say? $160,000? How? Yeah, that's not really concerning you, Jamil. You don't have any way to get involved. You have no money. You have no way to participate with us, right? I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, you're not a realtor. You don't have any credit, right? You don't have any cash. So if you don't have those three things, nothing you can do. And then they continue talking, right? I'm out of the conversation, back to my job. And then I hear them complain, right? And the best part is the complaint is they can't find any more bungalows.
Right. It's like there's a fourth part to this deal.
Yep. And so now I'm like, okay, well, wait. So tell me about that, right? You can't find any bungalows. How do I get involved? Well, if you can find us a house to demolish, we'd absolutely love to buy it. Okay, give me the details. So it's got to be a 50-foot frontage. It needs at least 100 feet in depth. It has to be zoned R2, so we can put a duplex on there, or R3 is better. R4 is incredible, but at least R2. And if you can find us that, we're happy to buy it. So next day, walking my dog, no joke, I'm like walking by a house that has a for rent sign on it. I'd actually try to rent there earlier, like maybe a month or two earlier than that, but it was a couple $100 too much for me. So I call the lady because it's still available. And I ask if she'd be interested in selling the house instead of renting it because she's been unsuccessful in renting it. It's been months. Her answer was, sure, for the right price. So then I inquire, well, what's the price that you're really looking for? $350,000 would be perfect. Thank you. So, the way my mind works, it's interesting because most people would go to the people that they'd overheard talking about it and say, hey, I can get this house for $350,000. But I didn't do that, right? I don't know. I wish I could go back into my mind and like get the motivation of what made me ask the question the way I did. I want to think I'm smart and that I did it knowingly.
Might have got lucky.
But I think I did get lucky, right? Because I asked them, how much would you guys pay for this? And they're like, 400. So then I start doing what I do best, which is telemarketing. I was a telemarketer essentially, right? At the time, I was calling people out of the yellow pages to see if they want to buy a website for their business. So I start telemarketing all my family. I call my uncles, my aunts, everyone that I could possibly think of that had money, asking for 350,000. Now, mind you, I'm the flunky who didn't get into medical school, right? I'm not the one. I'm not like lendable in my, according to my
Yeah,
family.
sure,
right?
buddy. You found
Yeah,
a deal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we got you.
Go get them.
Yeah. And I'm trying to explain to them what I'm going to do, and they're just like they're looking at this like pie in the sky situation, dude. This is never going to work out. We're going to end up buying this house, and no one's going to buy it from us, and you're going to put us in a big problem. Get an answer as to like if there was a solution, what would the solution be, right? And because my business was calling businesses out of the yellow pages to see if they were interested in having a website, sitting down and doing that for an afternoon was totally easy for me.
Mhm.
So I start at the letter A for in attorneys, and I go all the way, and I get to the letter S. I'm like, and most of the attorneys wouldn't even speak to me. I'd get to their secretary,
Paralegal, whoever.
shot
Yeah.
down right at the front desk. Like, didn't even get to talk to an attorney. Didn't even get to ask the question. But then a man named David Steed, who's been since disbarred. Unfortunately, I've said this guy's name so many times. He'd be so rich if he just didn't f up. Sorry, David. I don't. If he could help me with the situation, and he's like, explain it to me. So I tell him, and he's like, oh, that's easy. I'm like, okay, so how do you do it? What do I do? He's like, well, we call that a skip transfer in my world. We call that a skip transfer. So essentially, what you're going to do is we're going to skip one of the contracts and transfer the contract to the second contract. So this is how you do it. I'm going to send you an email with real estate contracts. You can print them out. You're going to print out 2 copies of them. One of them, you're going to be the buyer at $350,000. You're going to have the seller have their information there, your name as the buyer. But here's the really important part. You have to write and/or nominee beside your name. I'm like, okay, and/or nominee. He's like, I said, what does that do? He's like, well, that's what's going to allow us to skip. I'm like, okay. He's like, on the purchase price, write $350,000. And then everything else, closing date, closing attorney, all the things have to be exactly the same. Nothing can deviate on the 2 contracts. Everything else has to line up. The only thing that's going to be different are the names on the contract and the price. On contract 2, you're going to be on the seller line, not the buyer anymore. Okay, you're going to be on the seller line. You're going to have the people who are going to buy it from you for $400,000. You're going to have their name there, and on the price, you're going to write $400,000. Everything else has got to line up. Bring those contracts to me, and in a couple of weeks, if it all works out, I'll have a check for you. Like, really? That's it. Simple as that. So we do it. I put it all together. I'm like, I feel like I'm this like sleuth kind of thing doing it. Like I absolutely have no idea what I'm doing. But when I meet the woman, I think she could tell I had no idea what I was doing. But in her mind, $350,000 was like so good for her that if I ended up being real, she was okay with it, right? Plus, she hadn't been able to rent the house. And so they sign immediately, and I run these contracts over to David Steed, and like no joke, within I think it was like 12-ish days, he calls me, says, come by the office, I got your cashier's check. And I go, and it's $47,000 in change. He took his fee, right?
Sure.
And man, I folded that up and I put it in my wallet, and I'm crying, right? I just can't believe it happened. I didn't cash that check for months. I didn't cash it from that's the mentality I was living in, right? Scarcity. Like, this is never going to happen again. I'll never be able to do this again. This is the richest I'll ever be. This is more money than my parents have ever seen, right? But I'm going to try. So I start buying the newspaper every day. And back then, that's where people would list rentals. It was in the classified section of the newspaper, right? So I would start going into the classifieds and looking for rents, and I would look for the things that I was looking for, inner city neighborhood. Some of them would write the frontage, some wouldn't, whatever it was. And then I'd call them and I'd ask, hey, you got this property for rent. Have you thought about selling it? And most of the time, no, I'm not interested. But every once in a while, someone would say yes. And as soon as I started realizing that I could do this again and again, and the buyer was right there, they were ready, willing, and able.
Yeah, I mean, you had a built-in
I
buyer
had a
if you
built-in
found
buyer.
it.
And then
Super motivating to do it.
Yeah, because I know I've got my distribution. I know I've got my sale, right? But then I started getting smart because I'm like, okay, well, if these guys want it, then all these builders with all these signs up around town, I'm sure they want them too. So I start driving around. And I remember when I finally did cash the cashier's check, I bought myself this little GMC Jimmy. It was like $14,000, 5-speed, block heater in it, like not even a real heater, block heater in it, right? But it was my favorite 2-door little SUV. I was just in love with this thing, and I ripped around town, and I would door knock, I would call people, and then I realized that they were doing this at a larger scale on apartment buildings because I saw the same builder signs on these duplexes.
That's the same amount of work.
Right. and they were in front of these apartment buildings, and I see luxury condos, and I would see the developer name, and then I would see a phone number. And so I call, and usually it's the sales manager, and I'd say, hey, you looking for any buildings, like crappy buildings to, yes. All right. Who do I need to talk to? You have something? Possibly. Who do I need to talk to? You can talk to me. Who are you? I'm one of the partners. Perfect. What do you got? Give me some time. So now I'm like, I know what I got. I got to find more. I got to find buildings now. So I'm driving around town and I'm looking for apartment buildings with handwritten for rent signs. And eventually I find a seller. Now, do the same thing I did with the house. I ask what they'll pay, and they start talking in different language. They're like, well, if it's concrete, we'll pay you this much per door. We need at least 50% parking because we can't strata title without, and I have no idea what they're saying at the time, right? But I'm like, okay, 50% parking. So what does that mean? What does 50% parking mean? Like, I don't understand. So then when I'm talking to these apartment building owners, I'm like, does it have 50% parking? Without a idea what that even means, right? It's like, can you park half a car? Like, what the fuck? And then I find out 50% parking means that if they got 20 units in the building, they need 10 parking spots at least, right? I'm like, got it. Then I find out that concrete's worth more per door than wood. And then I find out that 2 bedrooms are worth more than 1 bedrooms. And if I can have a 50-50, 2-to-1 split, I've got the holy grail of buildings. So now I got my parameters and I'm off. And I'm driving around town.
Did you call title to get a list of all those, or you just kept driving?
No such thing.
Got it.
Yeah, there weren't list providers. It was me driving for dollars. Like the
truly just doing
doing what I would, just in my Jimmy, listening to Tupac, riding around Calgary, thinking I'm just the coolest dude in the world, right? Because I got some money in the bank, and now I have a business. I got a thing, right? And it made me feel so valuable, and it gave me all this confidence, and I would be able to make $100,000 on a building, and the developers were happy to pay.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'd make millions, right? Yeah. And so to pay the little guy, pay the little Indian kid $100,000 for a building, go and find us more. We'll take 5, right? And so that's my journey in the beginning of wholesaling for me.
Wow. Well, it's so funny because everybody kind of has that first start, and there's that moment in life when you just all of a sudden you discover, oh, I have a talent that I can make a lot of money. And for me, it was selling door to door. I was selling steak and chicken door to door. But my first day, I made $300 in like an hour and a half, and I went, oh my gosh, I have a talent that I'm going to have money in my life.
Right.
And it kind of just changed everything for me in that moment. But like as a wholesaler, I can only imagine you're just like the endless possibilities you're now thinking of. Yeah. And so you just started scaling it on a massive level.
Yep.
And I mean, now we fast forward all those years later. I mean, how many homes would you say you've wholesaled in your life?
I think we're counting, almost touching 8,000 at this point.
Wow.
And that's where that's how many homes I've had my name on the contract. I'm not touching these contracts these days, right? Like I've got people with power of attorney signing for me, my transaction coordinators and whatnot. So it's
When you've had how many students that have come through your program that you've taught wholesaling
uh,
to?
overall, from paid students, I've over 5,000. With respect to people that haven't paid me but just learned from my YouTube channel and whatnot, I'd say probably touching close to 10,000.
So you stayed in a lane. I think that's one of the most important things is like you figured out something and just became the best at that thing. Obviously, you've branched out to a lot of other things, including when get into your own TV show and all these other things
Yeah.
you've been doing. But really, you became known as the wholesale guy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you did. You were the guy that taught you how to wholesale real estate.
Right. Right. And I do it in a way that is different, I think, than the traditional teachers, right? I think one of the things that the marketplace was struggling with in the education space for wholesaling is that it was really expensive. So the educators were having people, buy lists that would cost, a couple $1,000. You'd have to skip trace them for the phone numbers, right? And that would be another couple $1,000. And then you'd have to cold call, and most people can't or won't, and
They
so
call
they'll have
7 or 8
yeah,
people
and
and
then
they're
they
like, this
stop.
sucks. Yeah.
So then they hire,
Yeah.
virtual assistants or
Just
cold
have somebody
callers to do it.
driving around for
Yeah.
them.
So then, the bill starts to really add up. And if you don't get success quickly, a couple of months in, you're, $10,000, $20,000 in the hole. It's very easy to quit. And I think that's where a lot of people got stuck, and they still get stuck until they find me. Because the way that I've always done it was the way that I learned back there, the way that I was doing it in Calgary as well, is that I made relationships with real estate agents, right? Real estate agents, I found out, were the gatekeeper a lot of times for the buildings, right? And because I graduated from single family into the building space, like my relationships with real estate agents became how I got a lot of my buildings to wholesale. And so when I started wholesaling in the United States and I moved from LA to Phoenix to start a life here, I began by phone calling real estate agents, asking them if they had anything that could use work, anything in original condition, needing a lot of work that I could look at, not even understanding how valuable of a question that was to most real estate agents, because that kind of property is problematic. It's not financeable usually. Um, many retail agents don't know what to do with a house like that. They're usually lower price, so they're not even worth it for the agent. They're like, man, what am I going to do with this? And at the time when I first started here, they were talking like $30,000, $40,000 homes, right? And here in Phoenix, those same houses are now 400 grand. But back then, they were like 30, 40,000 bucks. And so the agent looking at this $30,000 house on a
Making
3% commission,
$1,000.
they don't care. They don't want this deal. They don't want to do anything about it. Their shoes are worth more money than what they're going to get in commission on the house. And these Louboutins are going to have to go in the garbage if I go inside. And so like, this is the mentality of the agent that I'm talking to. So I start developing these relationships, and these people start realizing that I perform. I get the deals done. And so I build my business off of relationships, which became, I think, my calling card, because now, I do all this work to cold call one real estate agent. I build a relationship with that agent. I perform and I do the thing I'm supposed to do. The next time they have an opportunity, I'm the first call. I don't get that with a homeowner. With a homeowner, I got to call the homeowner again. I got to call, and then once I buy their house and I do the deal, they don't have a second one for me.
Right.
They're gone. That means I got to climb the mountain all over again to get my second, third, fourth, 10th, 100th deal.
Well, I'm guessing if you were anything, so like even with when I was doing real estate as an agent, I had I always had like 7 to 10 people that were like my key relationships.
Yeah.
That would send me 10 to 20 deals a year.
Right.
Like they were either loan officers or just somebody that just was super connected in the community or somebody that was a wholesaler or something. But I would get, so many deals from just a couple people. And when I found one of those people and I knew they performed, I mean, I would just, I'd do anything I could to make their life easier.
And one of the ways that I incentivized, right, as soon as they would start to understand my process, you take the real estate agent hat off. Let's forget the commission here, right? You're stuck in this world of 3%. It's stupid. Instead, why don't you represent me as the buyer? Don't represent the seller. Represent me as the buyer. Have your fiduciary duty to me. And for your compensation, I will give you 50% of my upside. So before the transaction closes, I'll tell you how much I've assigned this for. I'll send the commission instruction for half of what my assignment fee is. And you'll see my assignment fee on the HUD, and you'll see your commission on the HUD. They'll match. And so now an agent, instead of making $1,000, is making $10,000 on the same deal. So I become very valuable, right? I did a panel last night here in Phoenix at my office. There's an agent, Monique Walker, that I've been in business with now for over a decade. We've done hundreds of transactions. And what's interesting is that if I only answered Monique Walker's phone calls and I just blacked everybody else out, even Pace, right? I only answer her calls. We do roughly 5 to 8 deals a month. We make on average $30,000 a deal. So just think of that. If I spoke to one person, all of my bills are paid. I'm eating Nobu. I can be Howard Hughes it. I don't got to speak to anybody. I can be a recluse, just laying in my bed all day long, just talking to one person. That's how powerful relationships can be. That's how powerful this business can be. And everybody has access to do this. If you have somewhat of a decent personality and can understand the mechanics of contracts, this is a very easy business to get into.
So is the opportunity still in 2024 what it's been in the past? How has it changed? Like, somebody, 18-year-old kid is listening to this, a young, Damji right now, and what would you tell them?
Well, so I would say that the market, of course, is a little different right now than it has been even just a couple of years ago, right? Inventory is a little bit tighter, and all of that's real, but the game itself hasn't changed, and our volumes haven't really drastically changed either. So there's, at any given time of the year, at least 5 million vacant, distressed properties in the United States. Always.
There's that many properties just sitting vacant?
Always.
Wow.
Always. So if you think of that as the number, because that's where I'm going. We're not talking retail inventory. I'm not talking about a house I'd live in or a house you'd live in. No. I'm talking about a house nobody lives in.
Yeah.
That it's so bad, nobody lives there.
I remember I was showing an investor a home. It's probably, 2009 or 10. And his wife came and they lived up on the hill in a nice home. She goes, I would never live here. I go, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
You live on the hill.
You're not supposed to.
Yes. I need you to take those glasses off for a second.
Yeah.
And they ended up buying it and it was like 160 for like this, probably a home that's worth 5 today. But
right.
Anyway, no, but your point is like you're trying to find the homes that nobody wants, that nobody live in, the vacant homes, the ones that have been forgotten about.
Yes. Now you asked about an 18-year-old. Well, I'll do you one better, right? A 15-year-old comes into my community not too long ago. 15. Right? He's in high school. And I didn't, I'm not on the sales team, man. If I had known that somebody at 15 years old had called in to my sales floor to buy my course and they sold it to him, I would have fired that salesperson. No joke.
Sure. Because
I would have said, dude, unacceptable. You took advantage of a kid, right? Don't do that. Thank goodness that I didn't know, and that never came out, because this 15-year-old boy, he comes in, learns, and then realizes very quickly that he's not going to be able to do the amount of outreach and hit his KPIs on how many people he needs to talk to every day to make this work. Stuck to a desk at school. He couldn't make it work, right? So on his summer break, he builds a software. Dude, he builds a software that auto contacts real estate agents and auto follows up with them. And he plugs in ChatGPT so that the messaging is dynamic.
Wow.
And changes. And it's brilliant, right? And so all of a sudden I see this young man show up on my coaching calls. And one day he's like, hey, I made $50,000. I just did a deal today. I'm like, how old are you? He's like, 16 now. I started with you when I was 15. I'm like, wow, dude. How? Like, when did you have time to do the work? And then he's like, oh, I got a thing. I have a system I built, but it doesn't matter. He didn't want to like talk about it, right?
Mhm.
Because he was still kind of like, I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing.
Sure.
But somebody listened to him on the call that day and they reached out to him and they were like, hey, Andy, what were you talking about? What system? Because he's like, I got a W-2 job. I'm working 9 to 5. I don't got time to do this either. Like,
Mhm.
what did you do? He's like, oh, I built a thing. You want to use it? And the guy was like, yes. So he gives it to the dude.
Licenses it to
He
him.
does not yet.
Oh,
He
didn't
doesn't even think about that. He has no idea. He just gives it to him, right? And so the dude starts using it, and a couple weeks later, he's like, I just made $27,000, and I'm using Andy's system. And I'm like, what's Andy's system? He's like, no, don't worry about it. Now he doesn't want to say anything, right? But then somebody else messages Andy, and then I come to find out that so many people start messaging him that the publisher that puts my course out caught wind. And they reach out to me and they're like, hey, do you know this Andy Wrong kid in the mentorship? I'm like, yeah, kind of. I said, he's like a genius or something. He's making a whole bunch of money. He's like a young Asian guy. He's just killing it. Like super smart. He's like, yeah, he's selling something to the community. You know, that's not allowed, by the way. And I'm like, oh, like, you want to find out what's going on? Sure. So I reach out to him and he thinks he's in a lot of trouble, right? He's like, Jamil wants to talk to you personally. So I get him on the phone and I'm like, all right, Andy, what are you doing? What's going on here? And he's like, well, I started selling my software to people. I'm like, what does it do? Show it to me. So he shares a screen and I'm just like, whoa, you built this? Yeah. You own this? Yeah. Nobody else owns this. You own this hall? It's like, yeah. Want to be my business partner? He's like, really? I'm like, look, here's the deal. One of two things are going to happen. And I'm just saying this to you because it's true. You're very likely going to get thrown out of the community because you broke the user agreement. You're selling to the community. You're not supposed to be doing it. I got a call about it. I got kind of chewed out over it. Like, you can't do this unless I step in and I protect you. Basically, if you're my business partner, they can't fire me. So what do you say? He's like, and what does that mean? I'm like, well, I'll help you sell it because, I mean, what you've done here is incredible. And so we now are business partners and we have an auto communication software that we've got thousands of users on. Pace is an affiliate of it, and Pace and I do well marketing it together.
What's that called, by the way?
It's called Astro Blaster.
Okay, yeah.
I understand the name's a little funny sounding, but it's it works, and this kid now, I mean, he's now 18 years old. He's loaded, right? The day I realized I needed to buy a better watch was when I seen him and he was rocking an AP, and I'm like, I got to go shopping. But I'm so proud of him, right? Not only is he making money from software sales, but he's still wholesaling. So he's making around 50, 60K a month on his wholesale business. He's making 100, maybe a little bit more a month on his software business. He's a millionaire. And it's beautiful to be able to see that go on.
No, it's amazing. Well, it's there's this. I mean, obviously he's a very intelligent person, but there's something to be said for people that just aren't afraid to go for it, and just put themselves out there. Like, I think with wholesaling, I remember when in 2000, probably 7 or 8, when things had kind of started to collapse, I started calling the NOD list, the notice of default.
Yeah.
And I remember I went to one and the guy was selling it was like a wedding reception center and a parking lot across the street on the main street. And I had no idea how to put this deal together. He only wanted, I think, $275.
Okay.
Where
is this, by the way?
In Lehi, Utah, like the prime area, right on the main street.
Yep.
And I remember just sitting there, just like, shit, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this, but I knew there was so much opportunity. I mean, he'd bought it for like 8. He was into it. He needed to get 275 to not lose it to the bank. I mean, this was when things were at the worst. It was probably 2009 actually, because it was pretty bad. And I kind of just gave up instead of, kind of like what you did where you hustled and found a lawyer that could help you I kind of gave up on it. And fast forward a couple of years ago, my brother-in-law, he lives in Lehi, and he's like, hey, let's meet at my office and, we'll go to lunch. So I go and it's that building.
Wow.
And somebody had bought it and sectioned off the thing to be like 30 offices.
Whoa.
I said, Matt, how much are you paying for rent for this office? He's like, oh, I got a good deal. It's only $1,500 a month. there was 30 offices in that building.
God, dude.
And I just didn't have the
didn't
wherewithal
know.
to try to put that thing together,
Right.
or the foresight to turn it into offices and everything else. And anyway, I mean, that place probably brings in easy between that and the parking lot, probably 40,000 a month.
It's crazy.
I could have had it for 275. I just didn't know how to do it, you know? So there's the reason why I love, you know, what you're doing, what Pace is doing, but you know, like what I do is like, there is a level of like, when people don't act when they don't have the knowledge, if they don't know what to do, most people just kind of freeze.
Right.
And so I tell people, like, look, if you're young and you want to get into this, you don't have to set up a software, but you have an obligation to figure out, like, if you hear the term, you know, whatever, you know, like annuity, or, you know, like cap rate, and you can't explain to somebody what that is, then you don't have a good, you don't understand the game of money. You don't understand investing. You don't understand. When you hear wholesaling, you have no idea what we're talking about. Then you have an obligation. If you want to be wealthy, if you want to actually have money, then you have to learn these things.
Right.
And I was shocked at how many real estate agents didn't understand the investing side of things.
Yeah.
I really blew
Even
up.
today.
Oh, dude, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. It's called The Next Wave of Influence in Real Estate.
Yeah.
And I interviewed 100 of the top millennial real estate agents across the country. And I asked them the same 7 questions. One of them was, tell me about your own personal strategy for investing in real estate. And what's your portfolio? Dude, half of them did not own an investment property. These are the top agents in the country.
Right.
And what I realized was, like, most agents don't know how to speak this language, so that a lot of them steer away from it. They stay away from it. So if you really learn it, if you dive in, if you're 16, 17, 22, 25, and you're listening to this, spend 30 minutes a day becoming an expert on how to wholesale homes, on how to do this type of real estate. And within a year, you'll be in the top 1% of 1% of people that knows how to do this. And you can just crank. You can make so much money doing it.
So much. The funny thing about what you're saying right now too is that I think the reason why real estate agents shy away from investing is it's because of a lack in education.
It is. They just don't know how to do it.
They don't know how to do it. And then on top of that, so, you know, with almost touching 8,000 wholesaled properties, right? I've had to become an expert at understanding value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you imagine how many real estate send me a CMA, which is a comparable market analysis, right? For those who don't know, when they would send me a CMA, their numbers would be, they're like, the comps they would use would not make any sense. They would choose a comp from over here, one over here, one over here. And then I'd ask it, like, why did you use these comps? Well, you can go a mile out. Like, well, why would you go a mile out if right where you are, there's 4 model matches that disprove this value that you're trying to sell me?
Well, that's the thing, is most agents, they're so bad at creating value or figuring out what the value was, that that's what I got. I became the best at that. That's how I became the #1 agent, because
by learning how to comp,
I knew
understanding
exactly
value.
how much top dollar for your home was, right? Within seconds, I could look at it and I had a pretty good feeling. By the time I did my comps, a little twist on how I created that value.
Yep.
And that eliminated trying to come up with this other part, because I wouldn't be comparing it to the property a mile away. I wouldn't be comparing it to the one that was 1,000 square feet off, or whatever. And that allowed me to get very accurate on the values. And I think that was the thing that I did best, was I knew top dollar exactly what that property was worth.
And you instinctively do what appraisers do.
Sure.
Right? For me, I just started interviewing appraisers and finding out how are you valuing homes? Like, what are the parameters? What are the rules? And all of them had a few different rules, but there were common ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I took all the common rules and then I made what I call the appraisal rules, right? And my appraisal rules are, if I hand them to an appraiser, they look at it and they're like, oh my goodness, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
Up something too high. They don't understand what
Yeah,
they're
a lot of
doing.
wholesalers want way too much for what they're doing.
And they're out to lunch on what they think something's worth. They have no idea what they should have paid for it. Like, they just F up on the valuation of it.
Yep, it's always the value problem.
Yeah, it's always that, right? So the people that come through my program don't have that issue because I'm so diligent on understanding value and making sure that I drill that into their minds, right? I would way rather you pass on an opportunity because it's not an opportunity than waste yours, a seller's, an agent's, and a buyer's time with garbage. And because of that, and because that's how I've operated, I think we're starting to see the world of wholesale start to elevate because people are actually taking into consideration appraisal rules when they're locking up houses, when they're selling their houses, when they're giving a buyer an ARV. It's real.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so fun to talk, Rosa. We could talk all day. For those that don't know about your TV show, if they want to watch it, if they want to learn more about you, where is the best place to send them to?
I think my YouTube channel probably would be my favorite spot. You can check me out on my YouTube channel at Jamil Damji, youtube.com/Jamil Damji. I put out a lot of content out there where I teach people how to do what I do. My Instagram is fun, at jdamji. And if you're a TV watcher, like, I think here's the difference between the audiences, right? The people who are watching me on television, which the TV show is called Triple Digit Flip on A&E. If you're that, then you'll probably not be interested in learning because you're a TV watcher, which is totally fine, totally. Right? Go watch the house porn, enjoy it. It's funny, it's good, right? And do that. But if you really want to understand real estate, you got to turn the television off and you got to turn on YouTube and you got to start learning. You got to start understanding what things mean, and then do yourself a favor and go make some mistakes. Go pick up the phone, make some mistakes, go connect with people, go make some friends. Like, make your life about this thing and make it so that it changes your identity. And when your identity shifts into something else, I'm telling you, like, it's one of the most like, take it from a guy whose education failed him, right? That was the black sheep of my family, that probably shouldn't have been in the situation I'm in right now just because of the choices I made as a young man, who can now look back at my life at the age of 45 and say, thank you, God. Thank you for putting me in the situation where I had the opportunity to do this. And I want to see anybody who's out there that cares to change their situation, to become financially free, whether it's through wholesale real estate, creative finance, traditional real estate, do something. Just do something and focus on the one thing and be so damn good at it that you're undeniable.
Yeah, that's the best advice yet, too. Just pick a lane. There's so many ways to make money in real estate, outside of real estate, but pick one and become the expert. Go all in on it. You're a perfect example of that. That's why I love talking to you about that. But and that's how you do it. That's how you get wealthy. So thank you so much again, man.
Thank you, Jimmy, man.
All right.
Great to see you.
Likewise.